Welcome to Working the Story. Joining me today would be Mark Brown and Tina Fondellas, and we're going to talk about the big story of the, what would you say?
Decade.
Mayor Rahm Emanuel dropped the bombshell by saying he is not going to run for a third term. And you know, you got to understand that it came out of nowhere. Nobody expected it. What did you think when you heard it? Mark?
I was surprised. I went to the press conference. We didn't know what it was about, and it occurred to me on the way over there that this was a commitment, and I thought, no, because Fran Spielman, our great City Hall reporter, wasn't in town, and Fran always fixes it so that no news of importance
ever
occurs
happens
while
when she's away.
But she was out of town, and Fran ran a story in our paper last week that hinted at the possibility. It was the first I'd seriously considered the possibility. I thought he was going to run, even after I read Fran's story, which sort of laid the groundwork that he might not.
And this press conference, too, was kind of last minute, right? He didn't give too much notice to
No,
reporters.
it was
wasn't
not
the
on his
usual
regular schedule.
So I think reporters kind of had a sense something was up.
And how did you end up in the back of an SUV, a Tahoe, I think you said, with the mayor?
We didn't have anybody at City Hall yesterday, so we had dispatch to City Hall. Rachel Hinton and I both went over. Rachel, luckily, is a little more adept at tweeting and got the news out faster than me. And the Emanuel people, as often happens after this kind of announcement, they decided to do one-on-one interviews with the print media. Rahm ran late. Mm-hmm. They came to us and said, hey, we got a problem here. We can't keep this appointment with you. How would you like to ride along in the car, and we'll do the interview in the car?
That made it a little bit more intimate. Did you think he was going to get more information out there? He'll be more candid in the back of the Tahoe?
Honestly, we went into a panic because we didn't think it would be good for video, because the camera would be bouncing, the sound would be off. And it actually turned out to be exactly the opposite. It made for better video.
Right. So in your story, when you wrote about it, you talked about the mayor going from being, really sort of stressed out with holding his wife's hand tightly and making an announcement, and then getting in the Tahoe, and he was back to his normal self. Explain what you mean by that.
He had a hard time getting through that press conference.
Did he?
Yesterday. Yes. He
didn't cry, but he teared up.
He choked up.
And now I want to thank my grandfather.
He had a hard time getting the words out. There was no acting involved, I didn't think. He was grabbing his wife's hand, and then when he got it out, you could tell afterwards, he was relaxed with himself. He's happy with his decision. It was 4 hours later that we got him, and he was comfortable. And he's kind of the same cocky guy that's our mayor.
Rub-a-dub-dub. What's going on?
So Tina, when a story like this breaks, and you have a Mark Brown who's actually with the mayor, then you're doing something else. What was your main focus? What was your how did you kick into gear?
Running into the newsroom in a panic and everyone freaking out is what happened yesterday. And all hands on deck and people directed in different places. We were looking for all the reactions from the other mayoral candidates, just kind of ensuring that all the bases are covered. I don't cover this race typically. I am a Chicago citizen. I care about the race and I read about it every day, but I don't cover this race. So it was kind of like an all hands on deck, call every person that you know, find out what's going on. Just constantly updating everything.
And they were all too eager to speak, because it kind of opens the floodgates really for people to decide to declare that they were going to be in the race.
I do think that the people that had already declared did have an immediate sense of relief, because they were running against Rahm and now they're not running against him anymore. But then as the day progressed, all these giant names come into the mix of potential candidates. I think that we're not sure if it will help or harm them just yet.
I wonder what happened to Willie Wilson in this story.
I just wrote about a poll that was taken yesterday that said he's one of the top guys, that he had about 15% from this one poll. As you know, we've done a story, I think Maudlin wrote a story about the black community coming together to try to get a consensus candidate, so there's definitely a large group of people in Chicago who want to see an African-American candidate.
For someone now who didn't declare earlier, didn't take on Rahm, didn't decide to get into the race, do you think that there'll be something negative attached to them now deciding to jump in? I think in your story, Lori Lightfoot mentioned the fact that, okay, where was this person
Right.
all along?
I think those candidates, like you said, Lori Lightfoot and Paul Vallis both said that that's kind of, we get extra points, we get the bragging rights of saying we were going to go up against Rahm, but I think the voters, it's up to the voters, and I do think that they're willing to see who else will jump in. It's possible that it won't be viewed as a negative thing.
Yeah, so when a story like this breaks and you have to contact all these different people, well, explain how that process works.
I just called basically every political consultant that I know, just people that I don't even really deal with a lot. I just asked, what are you hearing? Who might enter the race? What does this mean for the city? What do you think are the main issues at play here? So it's just kind of like listening to people, asking lots of questions, and trying to get like a good kind of configuration of what's going on.
So the word yesterday that I heard over and over again was, this is a bombshell. Everybody was surprised and shocked. I think David Axelrod and myself were the only people to say we weren't surprised. Why were you surprised, Mark?
He loves the job. He's incredibly competitive. He just isn't the kind of guy to want to back down from a fight. The rest of the candidates that are in the race, there's really nobody to intimidate him. I think there are candidates who might have been.
You didn't
able
think
to,
Gary McCarthy, the former police superintendent, would be intimidating since he would know exactly what went on in that room?
No, I don't.
Why not?
Because whatever went on in the room, Gary McCarthy is part of it, and he owns that too. So,
Okay.
so Gary McCarthy, he's gonna get a certain percentage of the vote. Maybe people will like a guy from New York with a New York accent. I don't know. I've never seen it happen before. He's got a constituency in this race. Apparently, in this poll,
He's the leader.
he's the leader for what it matters. So all those things combined, and I just thought Rahm would gut it out, and he's got a lot of money, and money talks in politics. Money can recreate things. I thought he'd stick.
And you, Tina?
I had heard rumblings from other campaigns that something was up, that there's a reason why he hadn't announced his re-election bid. And then we read Fran Spillman's story last week in which she was saying that he was considering not, or she posed the question of why hasn't he done this yet? He had like the $8 million in his campaign fund that he wasn't doing much else. So yes, I did hear little rumblings, but I did not expect it in this way. And as Mark said, the mayor is very competitive. We assumed that we would have some sort of knowledge of what he might be doing next, but we had the same thing with the Attorney General, Lisa Madigan. We know that she's going to be doing something big at some point, but we're still not sure what that is.
So do you think that something big will be now her getting into this race?
The Madigans play everything close to the vest. There's not a peep out of her corner at this point. Susana Mendoza, on the other hand, has just jumped right in, and she's making all kinds of moves behind the scenes. Now, she was out front today. Tina covered it, and I don't think she said anything. But the truth is, she's going around and asking people for support. It's tricky for her because she's running. She'd be running for two offices at the same time.
I ran into Alderman Rod Sawyer, and it was interesting when I asked him up close, are you really seriously thinking about running for mayor because now it's a wide open field? And the first thing he said was, well, we, meaning his caucus, would have to come together and decide whether they're going to put a candidate. And he kept saying, we have to decide. So maybe there are some moves to try to build a coalition that would involve the aldermen and would involve some of the organizations on the south and west side. You think that's possible? And is that where the next part of this story goes? Where do we go from here?
Can you really hold something like that together, though? I mean, the history is that it worked for Harold Washington, and because it worked for him, then they kept trying to recreate it in the next several elections. You couldn't hold it together. You have to have a candidate strong enough to pull it off. Is
And some
Preckwinkle
people-
strong enough to pull it off? I don't think she'd back out Willie Wilson. He's got money. He doesn't think like Tony Preckwinkle.
Well, Lori
He'll stay.
Lightfoot too. I mean,
Yeah, Lori
they can
Lightfoot.
go coalesce with her, and she's a progressive. She's
So
a
does
lesbian.
this
She's
make-
an African American.
yeah.
She's all the things.
So does this make the mayoral tenure of Rahm Emanuel, now he's just a lame duck kind of a mayor, and then nothing will get done? Or do you think now he will be freed up?
I don't think he's going to go out quietly if we know him at all. He's going to be trying to make giant announcements. We're still waiting on the Amazon announcement. Maybe something will happen with that.
He had when I interviewed him yesterday, he pulled out a 3x5 note card, and he had written really tiny written letters, you know, on both sides, his list of things he wants to get done. He did hint around that there are some more companies that he thinks he could land that haven't been publicly disclosed at this point.
Right. Did you get the sense, though, of relief, comfortable with what he was doing?
Oh, absolutely, I do. And at the same time, you know, he emphasized, and I believe him, that he's really going to try to get a lot done.
So, in the next few days, where do you think this story is going to go? What's the next legs on this story?
The thing people want to know is who's going to get in. There is a power business community base in this,
True.
and they want who they want.
So they're
Now,
secretly someplace getting together and
I don't
already.
want-
They're making
I don't want to
calls.
make it sound like a cabal, but you know,
It's a cabal, right? You know, different kind of cabal.
You know, and maybe they want Michael Sachs, who was Mayor Emanuel's money guy, but maybe he wants to be the guy now. People are talking about him. I don't even know if he lives in the city, but there are people like that. Bill Daley says he wants in. I mean,
Really?
he's telling people he wants in. He's making calls.
Well, what about this? I mean, I've heard other people talk about this is a year of the woman. Do you think there's anybody strong enough?
I think there's some
Well,
work.
besides
Preckwinkle.
Tony
Preckwinkle, Mendoza,
Madigan.
Lisa Madigan.
Possibly Susanna Mendoza. Lori Lightfoot is running. Dorothy Brown is running. We have
Dorothy Brown, that's a wild card there. And I think you guys have done a lot of reporting, and she's still hanging in there. So by the mayor dropping out, it's going to bring in some new people. Besides the ones that you named, is anybody else you can think of that might pop up?
Valerie Jarrett.
Valerie Jarrett. She crossed
She's
my
in that
mind
blue
because
chip
she knows
category.
she's in the blue chip, but she has extensive experience with government. You know, from her time in the White House to her time in the Daley administration when she was running the Department of Planning and Development.
Well, that's
when
why I
she-
think she's a blue chip candidate.
Right.
She has, the business community has worked with her. They have a sense of who she is.
Okay.
She's worked with the big powers, not only in the city, but in the nation, so.
Do you think that the Laquan McDonald police shooting and how it was handled by Rahm Emanuel had anything to do with the fact that he is not running again?
Well, let me say, first of all, he said it wasn't, but depending on how it goes, it could still be a major problem. He's got to know that too, and he has to do what he thinks is right as mayor in that situation. And the fact that he'll be able to do it without having to think exactly about, well, how will Rahm, the candidate, handle this? I mean, that seems like a positive.
What about you?
There's,
For
there's
him and
also we just had a very terrible, bloody weekend a couple of weekends ago. You're blamed. You're the mayor. You're not helping these violent neighborhoods. So look how many weekends or years that he's experienced this. He's to blame for the gangbangers shooting everybody or all these kids dying. So I have to imagine that played a role in this.
Right. Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Tina. The big story, Rahm Emanuel's big news, not running again. Great job.